The dawn crept in unnoticed, painting the bedroom walls in a pale yellow light. Chloe stretched and reluctantly got out of bed. Today promised to be difficult, a court hearing regarding the inheritance dispute of her late father, which her ex-husband was trying to claim for himself. They had divorced 6 months ago, and now here they were again, forced to settle something under the stern arches of the city court. Chloe glanced at the mirror. The woman staring back at her was someone she barely recognized. Working as an orderly at the morgue had taken its toll on everyone, especially former doctors used to the sterile cleanliness of operating rooms and the admiring looks of colleagues. Where was the confident, goal-driven Chloe Cooper, the one admired by patients and envied by colleagues? The one who could stand by the operating table for hours, saving lives? Now, Chloe moved bodies in the morgue, registered causes of death, and mopped floors in a place where death was the only undeniable fact. And all because of Lucas Wright, the department head, who, before retiring, decided to cover up his schemes using her name. For years, he had used his position to rent out private rooms in the department, and all the paperwork was done under Chloe's name. She had trusted him, believing in him like a father. And now, the result, the loss of her medical license, a tarnished reputation, and a criminal mark that she could never erase. Chloe opened the wardrobe, choosing an outfit for court. What should she wear? What could make an impression on the judge, whose hands held her future? A business suit, not quite the right occasion. A youthful style, too fake. Besides, she wasn't that young anymore, 32, but inside, she felt much older. In the end, Chloe chose a modest gray knee-length dress and a strict black jacket. Minimal makeup, hair pulled into a messy bun. She wanted to look respectable, but not overly flashy. As Chloe drank strong coffee, trying to wake herself up, yesterday's conversation with the lawyer kept replaying in her mind. Chloe, you have to understand, your chances are slim. Albert is serious. He has a great lawyer, and he's ready to go all the way to take your inheritance. But he knows full well that my dad built the guest house with his hard-earned money. Chloe argued in despair. That's true. But Albert claims he lent money to your father. And unfortunately, he has indirect evidence, bank statements, transfers. Though not directly to Mark, but to his supplier of building materials. It's a lie. He set it all up. Chloe felt a lump rise in her throat. I understand how you feel, the lawyer continued, but in court, facts are what matter. And unfortunately, they are not on our side. Shaking off the memories, Chloe left the house, breathed in the fresh morning air, and headed to the bus stop. The bus was full of people hurrying to work. She gazed out of the window, watching the city wake up. Gray high-rises passed by, the gloomy faces of passers-by, and the bright shop signs. The courthouse greeted her with cold grandeur, high ceilings, marble columns, stern-faced guards. Everything here instilled awe and a sense of the importance of what was happening. She passed through the metal detector, showed her passport, and went up to the second floor, where the courtroom for her case was located. There weren't many people. A few lawyers in expensive suits nervously conversed among themselves, a few anxious visitors flipped through papers, and a lonely woman in a scarf whispered a prayer. Chloe sat on a bench in the corner, trying not to attract attention. Her heart was pounding, her palms were sweaty. She tried to calm herself, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. But it was in vain. The lawyer's words kept replaying in her mind. Her chances, slim. The facts, not in our favor. Chloe shivered and glanced around the room. Albert sat a few meters away from her. His hand boldly rested on Natalia's knee, his new girlfriend, the Mistress Brittany. Chloe quickly looked away, embarrassed. Just yesterday, he swore eternal love to her, promising to share both sorrow and joy. And today, Here he was, in court, trying to take her last possession, the memory of her father, embodied in the small guest house by the forest. "Well, Chloe," he drawled with a sugary voice, "came to admire your defeat?" She remained silent, trying not to rise to the provocation. "Now you're not a doctor, but a janitor in the morgue," Albert sneered, showing no restraint. "A pitiful sight. I used to be proud of you." "Albert, don't waste your time on this failure," Brittany purred in a languid voice. "No, no, let her listen," the man waved dismissively. "She needs to hear the truth. You thought I would let you leave me with nothing? You were wrong. I'm going to take everything that belongs to me. This house was built by my father." Chloe finally couldn't hold back. "You have nothing to do with it." "Oh, how wrong you are," her ex-husband smirked. "Your father was a good man, but a bad businessman. I helped him, invested money into this tourist dump. And now, I just want to get my investments back." "You're a liar." "We'll see about that," Albert declared confidently. "Soon your inheritance will be mine." He tightened his embrace around Brittany and, with a contemptuous look, walked to the other end of the hall. Chloe remained seated on the bench, feeling the fury and despair boiling inside her. At that moment, her lawyer approached her. "Chloe, it's time. Try to stay calm and answer the questions clearly and confidently." She nodded, stood up, and followed the lawyer. In the center of the room stood the judge's seat, where a woman in a black robe sat with a stern expression. On either side of her were the lawyers' tables, where Albert and his attorney were already seated. Chloe took her place beside her lawyer, feeling dozens of eyes on her, sympathetic, judgmental, curious. The judge announced the start of the session. The lawyers introduced themselves, and the witness testimonies began. Albert was the first to be called. He spoke confidently and convincingly, telling the court how he had helped Mark, invested money in building the guest house, and believed in his dream. Trained by his lawyer, Albert portrayed himself as a caring husband and son-in-law, always ready to lend a helping hand. Chloe listened to him silently, feeling the anger boiling inside. How could he lie like that? Finally, it was her turn to testify. Chloe walked to the witness stand, feeling her knees tremble. "Your Honor," she began, trying to sound confident. "Everything my ex-husband said is a bold lie. My father built this house with his own money. He worked his whole life to fulfill his dream, to build a guest house by the forest for tourists." A dissatisfied murmur spread across the courtroom. "Albert wants to take the last thing I have left. The memory of my father," Chloe finished. "I won't let him do this." Immediately after, Albert's lawyer began asking her tricky questions, trying to confuse her and paint her in a negative light. He asked about her job, her relationship with her father, her financial situation, all to prove that Chloe hadn't cared for her parent and didn't deserve the inheritance. After all the questioning, the judge declared a recess to consider the evidence presented. Chloe felt as though she had lost and that Albert would take everything that was so dear to her. Finally, the judge returned to the courtroom and announced her decision. Having reviewed all the presented evidence and listened to the witness testimonies, the court has concluded that the plaintiff's claims, she paused, are valid. Chloe felt the world around her collapse. She couldn't believe her ears. How could this even be possible? The court has ruled to transfer the ownership of the house located at. The judge continued, but Chloe could barely hear her words anymore. The world blurred before her eyes. The house, built by her father, now officially belonged to Albert Sanchez. Chloe didn't hear the judge's words after that. A ringing filled her ears, and everything went dark before her eyes. She felt as if everything inside her was tearing apart from pain and despair. However, the court grants the defendant, Chloe Cooper, the judge paused again. 1 month to appeal the decision. During this period, she may continue to reside in her father's guest house. The judge struck the gavel and declared the session closed. Chloe remained in her seat, unable to rise from the shock she had just experienced. Albert walked over to her, beaming with joy. "Well, Chloe," he said, mockingly looking at his ex-wife. "Congratulations on your defeat. You lost. Now the house is mine." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with sadness. "You think I'll give up? If you do, you're deeply mistaken. I will fight until the end and prove that you're a liar and a fraud." "Go ahead," Albert smirked. "But I doubt you'll get anywhere. You have no money, no connections, no support. You're alone against everyone." With a cold glance, Chloe watched her ex-husband walk away, then sighed deeply. No matter what, her job wasn't canceled. Her duties as an orderly in the morgue were something no one would do for her. Leaving the courthouse, she ignored the bus that passed by and decided to walk instead. If she were late for her shift, she could stay late. It wasn't the first time. Chloe was walking down the street, and in her mind, like an old film reel, scenes from her past life were playing. A life that seemed so happy and so distant. She had been lucky with her parents. Mark, her father, was a jack of all trades, an engineer at a factory. He could fix anything, from a broken socket to an old Ford. And in the evenings, after work, he would take his plane and chisel and turn pieces of wood into amazing creations. Her mother, Gwen, was the life of any party. Working as a cook in a local cafeteria, she knew how to feed not only the staff but also all the local kids. Her cabbage pies and curd pastries were considered a true legend in their neighborhood. Chloe, briefly closing her eyes, tried to hold on to the fleeting images. There she was, a little girl sitting on her father's lap, listening to his stories about faraway lands. In the next scene, she was in the kitchen, making dumplings with her mother, laughing and covering each other in flour. But the most vivid memory was the terrible incident that had happened in her early school years. Back then, Chloe was chasing a puppy that had fallen into an open sewer manhole. Without thinking, she jumped in after it. The puppy was saved, but the girl hit her head hard. From then on, she developed a stutter. Every word came with difficulty, as though it had to be pulled out with pliers. Chloe the stutterer, that hurtful taunt followed her everywhere. Her classmates laughed, pointed fingers, and Chloe felt the ground beneath her feet disappear. She hid from everyone, afraid to say a single word. Deep down, she felt like an outcast, hiding in the sink of her own fear. Her parents took her to speech therapists, but they just shrugged, saying it was psychosomatic. Chloe had already lost all hope when her father, in desperation, suggested they go to a fortune teller. "You shouldn't give up, daughter. We have to try everything," said Mark. The fortune teller lived on the outskirts of the city, in a small, crooked house. Chloe remembered her wrinkled face, piercing gaze, and the sharp smell of herbs that filled the air. Baba Miranda stared at the girl for a long time, murmuring something, waving her hands above her head, and then suddenly said, "Your fear lives in the past. It wasn't the darkness of the manhole that scared you, but the loneliness. You felt abandoned, unwanted." Chloe was stunned. How could the old woman know that? That day, the fortune teller gave her some sort of amulet, read a spell, and said, "Don't be afraid anymore. Don't come to me again. You're strong now, you'll handle everything on your own." After leaving Baba Miranda's house, Chloe looked at the amulet hanging around her neck and smiled. It was just a regular peach pit with a hole in the middle, through which a thin string was threaded. Yet, she felt that something had changed inside her from that moment on. How naive that kind old lady was. A peach pit that could cure stuttering. Ridiculous. Chloe thought this as she walked home, holding her father's hand. Then, something incredible happened. Gradually, her stutter began to fade on its own, and soon Chloe was speaking freely and confidently. She started to perform better at school, gaining confidence in herself. And yet, she still kept the peach pit to this day, considering it her good luck charm. Baba Miranda had long passed away, but her image remained forever in Chloe's memory. Did the fortune teller really help her, or was it just a coincidence? Chloe didn't know the answer. But deep down, she believed that Baba Miranda was not as simple as she seemed. In any case, after that meeting, her life had changed for the better. But one memory still haunted her. The prom night. Chloe spent an entire week choosing her dress, got her hair done at the salon, and was nervous with anticipation. And then Thomas, her first love, a high school senior, simply didn't show up. She waited for him until the end of the evening, and later found out that he had left the city without telling anyone. Chloe felt that loss especially deeply. It was her first real drama. A blow to the heart. She once again felt abandoned and unwanted. After that, she couldn't shake off the feeling for a long time. But life went on. She graduated from school with honors and entered medical university. Dreaming of becoming a surgeon and saving lives, she studied hard, without sparing any effort. And then, her dream came true. Chloe became a doctor and worked at one of the best clinics in the city. A little later, Albert appeared in her life. Handsome, charming, self-assured, a young businessman. That day, he brought his employee to the clinic, who had cut his hand on glass. Chloe quickly provided assistance, stitched up the wound, and Albert didn't take his eyes off her. After that, he began to court her. He gave her flowers, invited her to restaurants, took her on walks. Chloe fell in love like a schoolgirl, blinded by his charm and attention. It seemed to her that she had finally found her happiness. When Albert proposed, Chloe agreed without hesitation. However, meeting his parents was the first warning sign. Chloe's parents were simple, humble people, while Albert's parents seemed like they were from another world. Refined, arrogant, accustomed to luxury. Chloe clearly remembered how her future mother-in-law had disdainfully looked at her mother's modest dress. "Who is this? Did you really bring this simpleton to a respectable place? Albert, are you completely blind? She's from a poor family," Isabella Leonidovna whispered to her son. At that moment, Albert's father, Anthony, smirked and asked Mark about his job. "An engineer? Well, that's commendable, but, you know, we're used to a different level," he said with an expression as if he were doing a huge favor by agreeing to this marriage. Chloe could feel her cheeks burning with shame. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the ground. But Albert squeezed her hand and said, "Don't listen to them. I love you." After dinner, he apologized. "Chloe, don't mind them. They're just peculiar. What matters is us. Our feelings." And Chloe believed him then. The wedding was lavish, extravagant. She felt out of place, but tried not to show it. The young woman was happy, or rather, tried to convince herself of that. She didn't take her husband's last name, and Albert didn't insist. But then everything began to crumble. Work, money, Albert's ambitions, everything gradually began to destroy their relationship. Albert spent more and more time away from home. Chloe felt increasingly lonely. He became irritable, critical, blamed her for not knowing how to behave in society, and called her parents country bumpkins who didn't meet his status. As if by curse, at that very difficult time in her life, Lucas Wright, the head of the surgery department, appeared. He was a respected and influential figure. He proposed that she participate in some scheme that, according to him, would benefit the clinic. Chloe, naive and trusting, eagerly agreed, not knowing that Lucas was already using her for his dirty schemes. When everything came to light, the head of the department had already retired, and all the blame fell on Chloe. She was simply fired from her job. Albert, in turn, didn't support his wife and claimed that it was her own fault. She should have thought carefully before signing any documents. In short, he turned his back on Chloe at her most difficult moment and, without hesitation, openly took a mistress. The divorce came swiftly, as by then, Chloe knew almost everything about her husband. Soon, Chloe's father passed away, the man who had dreamed all his life of opening a small one by the forest to have a little passive income. After waiting the required time, Albert showed up in court with a lawsuit. He claimed that the house her father had built was actually built with his money, and demanded that it be recognized as his property. "Now you're not a doctor, but a janitor in a morgue," his words, spoken in court, echoed in Chloe's head over and over again. She was walking down the street, tears streaming down her face. She felt crushed, humiliated, broken. The morgue worker felt like her whole life had been a series of failures and disappointments. In that moment, she remembered Baba Miranda's words, "Now you're strong, and you'll handle everything on your own." Chloe stopped, wiped away her tears. And she truly was strong. She had survived so much. She would survive this too, proving to her ex-husband that he was wrong. With this thought, Chloe entered the morgue building. The cool, formaldehyde-scented air brushed against her face. But Chloe didn't seem to feel the cold. She sighed heavily and immediately headed to the director's office to receive her work instructions for the day. Stephen Hall, a short, plump man with a sad look in his eyes, was sitting at his desk, sorting through some papers. He looked up at Chloe and gestured to the chair. "Oh, you're right on time. I have a task for you." Chloe sat down across from him, waiting for instructions. "Here's the deal. Today, we need to prepare a young man for burial. Apparently, he's some kind of lawyer, with money and connections. They say he's the son-in-law of the head of the Regional Bar Association, Heinrich Hernandez." "What happened?" Chloe asked with concern. Despite everything she had been through, her professional interest hadn't gone away. His heart stopped, Stephen Hall replied. "On the beach, by the river. No autopsy will be conducted." Chloe frowned. "Why? Did his wife request it?" "She's a very influential lady. Her name is Cassandra." "I see," Chloe responded dryly. She suspected that money could solve many things, even something as mandatory as an autopsy. "And one more thing," Stephen Hall continued, looking her straight in the eye. "The late man's wife has asked to capture the moment when you finish the cosmetic procedures and close the coffin lid." Chloe was taken aback and stared at her boss in surprise. Was he joking? Filming the deceased in a coffin? Why? "She says she wants to keep the memory of her husband." She's in tears, completely devastated. Chloe shook her head skeptically. All of this seemed strange and illogical. "Stephen Hall, are you sure this is the right thing to do?" "Chloe, don't ask unnecessary questions," her boss cut her off. "You know how I feel about you, but this is a direct order from above. If I refuse, I'll have problems. And what about you? You know it's not easy right now." She sighed sadly. He was right. There was no point in arguing. "All right, Chloe agreed. When do we start? In about an hour. The body is already in the sectioning room. The camera is there too. Cassandra lent her professional one. Chloe stood up from her chair. Okay, I'll go then. Chloe, Stephen Hall called after her. Try not to think of anything bad. You need to focus on your work now. She nodded and left the office. She then headed to the storage room to change into her work uniform. She had a little time to spare, so she could disinfect the tools for the expert first, and then proceed with her main task. Soon, the pathologist entered the office, a man with the kindest heart. Bruce always showed sympathy for her and had her back when needed. I used to be a surgeon myself, Chloe. They used to say I was quite good at it, actually, Bruce suddenly said when she started cleaning the table and tools with a special solution. Chloe looked at the pathologist with interest, waiting for him to continue. His eyes sparkled with tears, and he even took off his glasses to wipe them. You see, life is a complicated thing. Today you can be on top, and tomorrow, at rock bottom, among society's outcasts. Everything is relative, unfortunately. Chloe nodded in agreement. Who, if not her, knew this hard truth? I used to be a completely different person, the pathologist continued. Slim, charismatic, took care of myself, ran in the mornings, and looked after my health. My wife, a beauty. My daughter, a sight to behold. Back then, I thought my hands were literally made of gold. Whatever surgery I took on, everything went well, and the patients improved. Any medical council or international seminar, I was always at the top of the list. They had already predicted a position as head of the department for me when the tragedy struck. Chloe bit her lip in pain, knowing that Bruce was about to say something truly awful. My wife, Tanya, and my daughter died in a car accident. An SUV drove straight into them head-on. The driver was a drunk son of some rich guy. The paramedic told me right away, no chance. My little girl passed away instantly, but my wife fought for 3 more days in intensive care. Then she regained consciousness for a moment, grabbed my hand, and followed our daughter, the pathologist sobbed. A tear slowly rolled down Chloe's cheek. How painful it was to hear such a story when life had literally derailed. Meanwhile, Bruce continued. After the funeral, it was as if someone had swapped me out. Especially when I was picking out my daughter's coffin. I even lost consciousness at the funeral home. They had to call an ambulance. But I came to. The spark in my eyes, though, was gone. Work turned into a routine. But it was surgery that kept me going. The person responsible for the accident was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He served 1 and got out on parole. It was a turbulent time, the 90s. That doesn't seem very fair, Chloe said cautiously. That's true. The father must have paid to get his son off the hook. But the lesson didn't help him. 6 months later, he got into another accident. This time, though, he was the one who got hurt. The car literally wrapped itself around a pole. Only the airbag saved him. They say in the ambulance, the rich kid's heart stopped twice, but the resuscitators knew their job. They saved the poor guy. He had severe bleeding. And, as luck would have it, I was on duty in surgery that day. Can you imagine the irony of fate? Chloe instinctively tensed, deep down fearing what her colleague would say next. But Bruce wanted to talk so badly, he didn't even notice the tears running down his cheeks. I look at him, lying on the table, and all I can see in my mind are the graves of my daughter and wife. I gripped the scalpel tightly. And the operating nurse had no clue. Who is this? A patient is just a patient to her. They all look the same. But not to me. A shiver ran down Chloe's spine. Anyway, I did everything as I should. Didn't break the Hippocratic Oath. I started the surgery. The patient's blood pressure was critical, his heart barely beating. The nurse was shaking her head. She said, "That's it, let him go, Bruce," but I didn't. I restarted his heart. The blood loss was critical, and a rare blood type was needed. The assistant was once again in a panic, and I rolled up my sleeve and nodded to the nurse. I had the right blood type. The pathologist lifted his tear-filled eyes to Chloe, covered his face with his hands, and whispered, "I saved him that day. I literally pulled him back from the brink of death." When the chief doctor found out, he immediately went gray. He thought they'd take me straight from the operating room to jail. But I fulfilled my medical duty, didn't betray my principles. After the surgery, though, I declared at the medical council that I could no longer operate. You know, it was like something inside me broke. I quit and hung up my coat. I wandered for 6 months, and then I found a job here in the morgue. It's quieter for me here. And what happened to that rich guy? Chloe couldn't help herself, having finished disinfecting and washed her hands. The pathologist shook his head. I don't even know for sure. His father later offered me a lot of money, enough that I could live the rest of my life without working. But I suggested he donate it to an orphanage. I don't need that wealth. I'll just go to the cemetery to visit my daughter and wife, sit on a bench, tell them about my life, and share the news. Chloe wiped away a tear and, unable to hold back any longer, hugged her older colleague. After a moment, she left the room and headed to the preparation and issuing room for bodies to the deceased's relatives. There, in the coffin, on a special pedestal, lay a young man, about 30 years old. It seemed like the night shift orderlies had made her job easier, dressing him in clothes. He had well-defined features, thick dark hair, and a strong body. A type that always caught women's attention. It was a shame that he was so young and had left this world so soon. Chloe turned on the camera, set up on a tripod against the wall. Yes, it was a professional one, with many settings. Cassandra clearly hadn't skimped on it to preserve the memory of her husband. Chloe moved closer and tensed. There was something subtly familiar about the deceased's appearance. But what exactly? His high, open forehead? Or the dimple on his chin that she had seen somewhere before? Her lips trembled betrayingly. Sweat beaded on her forehead. No. This can't be. It must be a mistake. Or a tragic coincidence. Oh my God, it's Thomas. The same guy from the graduation, the one who disappeared without a word. And now he was lying in the coffin, as if he were sleeping. Could all of this really be happening to her, here and now? Chloe felt tears running down her cheeks. Could fate really be playing such a cruel joke on her again? Or maybe it was just a mistake. Chloe quickly skimmed through the accompanying documents and gasped in surprise. It was all true. Thomas Wood. The guy from her youth. Chloe wiped her eyes and looked at him more closely. Something was definitely wrong. But what exactly? Was it his too rosy skin? Or his unusually calm, too lifelike expression? No, he didn't look like a dead person at all. Chloe examined the body. There were no visible injuries, only a slight flush to his cheeks, unusual for the dead. And then she noticed 2 tiny, barely noticeable marks on his wrist, like bites or injections. In that instant, a frantic thought flashed through Chloe's mind. A snake. Exactly. Thomas could have been bitten by a poisonous snake. Without wasting a second, she pressed her fingers to his neck, trying to find a pulse. Barely noticeable, weak, almost imperceptible, but he's alive, Chloe breathed out, then immediately screamed. Stephen Hall, come here. He's alive, do you hear me? Stephen Hall rushed into the room, followed by a frightened pathologist. What's going on? What's the matter? The director asked anxiously. Chloe, with a trembling hand, pointed to Thomas, lying in the coffin. He's alive. His pulse is barely detectable, but it's there. I think it's a snake bite. Stephen Hall froze in shock. No way. Well, I'll be damned. But go ahead, Chloe. You're a doctor. She decided not to waste time and started working with Bruce. In that moment, everything she had been taught at university came rushing back to her. All the skills she had honed over years of practice. Paramedic, Rick, come here, hold his head. Thomas, we need adrenaline and all the stimulants we have. Chloe commanded, not taking her eyes off Thomas. Together with the pathologist, she checked the airway, cleared his mouth of mucus. Then, noticing that the pulse had stopped again, she started performing chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Minutes stretched on like hours. The room was filled with deathly silence, interrupted only by the rhythmic thumping of Chloe's hands on Thomas's chest. Come on, breathe, darling, breathe, Chloe whispered, as though the man could hear her. Bruce, pale as a sheet, stood nearby, holding syringes with medications. Chloe administered the adrenaline and continued with the chest compressions. No result. Everything was in vain. They were too late. They noticed a mistake too late. And suddenly, Thomas gasped. His eyelids fluttered. There's a pulse. The elderly pathologist exclaimed. There is. Weak though. Chloe felt a wave of relief and hope wash over her. She continued to maintain his breathing and heart function. A few minutes later, the ambulance arrived. The doctors entered the room, stopping in their tracks, looking around in shock. What's going on here? One of them asked in surprise. We're resuscitating him, Chloe replied without taking her eyes off Thomas. It looks like he was bitten by a poisonous snake. We need the serum. The doctors quickly assessed the situation and joined in the rescue efforts. Together, they managed to stabilize the pulse. Thomas was moved onto a stretcher and taken to the hospital. The morgue was filled with a ringing silence. Stephen Hall looked at the paramedic with admiration and quietly said, You saved him. You're a real doctor, a gift from God. Chloe sat down on a chair, feeling her knees tremble. She was exhausted, but at the same time, happy. I need to call the wife of the deceased. No, the one who's alive now, what's her name? Cassandra, Stephen Hall sighed. I'm sure she'll be in shock. Chloe smiled. To be honest, she was in shock herself. It wasn't every day that you had to save your first love, while also taking an involuntary trip down memory lane. Thomas would be surprised when he finds out who saved him. And why, all those years ago, he didn't come to the graduation. Could there have been serious reasons? Towards the end of her shift, Cassandra arrived at the morgue. Thomas's wife was wearing a form-fitting black dress that accentuated her flawless figure. On her face was a mask of sorrow, but in her eyes, Chloe only saw irritation, not pain. Are you Chloe Cooper? Cassandra asked coldly, not even looking at her. Yes, it's me, Chloe replied quietly, wiping her hands on her wrinkled lab coat. Cassandra walked past her as though Chloe were invisible. Stopping by the window, the woman turned around. I came to thank you for you, bringing my husband back to life. There was no trace of gratitude in her voice. Well, it's my job, Chloe responded awkwardly, trying not to show her nervousness. Cassandra smirked. Working as a morgue attendant isn't exactly the most prestigious job for a doctor, don't you think? Chloe remained silent. She didn't feel like explaining to this arrogant woman exactly why her medical license had been revoked. Cassandra opened her purse, took out a thick paper envelope, and handed it over. I want to thank you financially for saving my husband. Thank you, but I won't take the money, Chloe shook her head. Cassandra's eyes narrowed in displeasure. Why? Do you think my husband's life is worth more? Isn't it a bit uncool to refuse? It's not about that, Chloe replied calmly. I just can't do it. Cassandra pouted. You're strange. But, as you wish. I thought you'd need the money. After all, since you lost your license. I suppose you're in a tough spot. Chloe felt a surge of anger inside. Do you know something about that? Cassandra shrugged. In our town, everyone knows everything. Especially about people who get into trouble. She smirked again, then slightly tilted her head and said, Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Specifically about Thomas. And what do you want to know? Chloe asked, her guard up. Why did you think my husband was alive? You're not a pathologist. I saw a discrepancy, Chloe replied. His skin was pink, and then I felt a weak pulse. Also, there were bite marks on his wrist. Bite marks? Cassandra repeated, frowning. What kind of bites? They look like snake bites. In any case, I think Thomas could have been poisoned. Cassandra fell silent for a few seconds, as though considering something. Interesting. Very interesting. Aren't you happy you made it? Chloe dared to ask. Instead of answering, the woman laughed. Of course, I'm happy. It's just that my life with Thomas hasn't always been easy. He hid for a long time and had to live under another name. Hid from whom? From the people his father owed a huge amount of money to, Cassandra replied with a smirk. My dad was always a gambler. Charles, may he rest in peace, lost everything he had in cards, even his own son. Chloe stared at the businesswoman, stunned. What do you mean by that? I mean that after high school graduation, Thomas was supposed to work for the criminal bosses. He was going to work off his father's gambling debts. At first, as a courier, a lackey. Bring this, hand that. It was like something out of the Middle Ages. Luckily, Thomas's mother convinced him, and they ran away 2 days before he turned 18. At that moment, Chloe remembered that evening when the guy hadn't shown up and once again relived the pain and humiliation she felt from the mocking looks of her classmates all those years ago. Only now did she understand why Thomas had done what he did. My God, to lose your own son. What kind of scoundrel must his father have been? And yet, you wouldn't have guessed it just by looking at him. However, Chloe herself had only seen Charles a couple of times, and even then, it was brief. Thomas never talked about his father and would always close up whenever she brought up the topic of parents. Your husband clearly didn't want that kind of life, Chloe whispered. No one does, Cassandra replied, her voice softening slightly. But sometimes, there's just no choice. Thomas hid for a long time, stayed hidden so no one would find him, even changed his name. And you knew about all this? Chloe asked. Of course, I married him knowing his past. With the help of my father, I did everything to protect Thomas. You see? My dad is the head of a law firm. He took Thomas in as a young man after law school. Can you imagine? Back then, Thomas was unloading freight cars at night to make ends meet, while also taking care of his sick mother. But when he joined my father's law firm, Thomas blossomed. Money came, a fancy car. His mother had surgery. Chloe awkwardly looked away. Tell me, if you loved your husband, why did you decide to film him in the coffin with a camera? Chloe asked. It doesn't really add up. Hidden footage in a morgue doesn't match the idea of loving someone to the grave. Sorry for the tautology. Cassandra hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting nervously, but then she composed herself and answered softly. I didn't want my husband's past to come to light and planned to bury him in a closed casket. He even specified that in his will. In case of my death, I want to be buried in the cemetery of my hometown. I was even scared to think that he might be pursued after death. I knew it would happen. We had just started living normally. We had even found a child at the orphanage. I'm afraid of ruining my figure, so I'm not planning on having children. Chloe bit her lip, struggling to believe a word of it. Something in the rich woman's words didn't add up. Thomas, in the prime of his life, suddenly wrote a will. But why? Was he afraid of something? What if it wasn't just an accident? Chloe asked. Cassandra looked at her with disdain. Stop making up nonsense. Thomas just had a bad swim in the river. His heart stopped. A temperature drop, it happens. And those little spots on his hand, just a coincidence. He must have injured himself. Well, snake bites, Chloe began, they're hard to confuse with anything else. Cassandra was silent for a moment, then, as if dropping her mask, she added sharply. Listen, Chloe, I don't know how exactly you saved my husband, but I want you to forget everything that happened here. Forget about Thomas, about those bites, and everything else. Believe me, it's in your best interest. Are you threatening me? Chloe asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. Cassandra smirked. Why would I threaten you when my father is the head of a law firm? I'm just giving advice. Don't stick your nose in things that aren't your business, especially when it could be dangerous. With those words, Cassandra turned and left the morgue, leaving Chloe alone among the cold walls and oppressive silence. Soon, an elderly pathologist approached her and gently touched her hand. Don't worry, don't pay attention to that little thing. She's nothing special. It's her father's who run the show there. And probably Thomas's future too. I have a feeling this young lawyer didn't almost give up his life for nothing. Just like that, his father-in-law is involved in everything. The young nurse sighed sadly but didn't continue such an unpleasant conversation. She had had enough for one day. A failed trial in the morning, then the resuscitation of a dead man. No one's got the strength or nerves for this. Finally, at the end of her shift, she went outside. The heavy day had drained her completely. Her legs ached, and her head buzzed with worries. Right now, Chloe only dreamed of one thing, to get to her rented apartment as soon as possible, take a hot bath, and forget everything with a deep sleep. But at the entrance, they were already waiting for her. Albert and Brittany were standing by his car, cooing like two lovebirds. Well, how's it going? The ex-husband asked mockingly. What do you want? Chloe asked tiredly. We came to talk about your father's inheritance, Brittany interrupted. Albert has already found buyers for the guest house, so it's better to agree to our terms. I'm not selling anything, Chloe answered firmly. This house is a memory of my parents. I hope you understand that you have no chance of winning in court, her ex-husband hissed maliciously. Now you're nothing without a medical license and money. Albert, I'm not afraid of you, Chloe replied defiantly. And I will fight until the end, no matter what it costs me. Well, we'll see, you'll regret it, the businessman threatened, laughing with his mistress. Go to hell, Chloe snapped and entered the building. After quickly having dinner, she took a bath and, turning on the TV, lay on the couch. She couldn't fall asleep all night. Albert's words echoed in her head. "You're nobody, a disgusting janitor." Could it be true? Was her ex-husband right? Had she really lost everything? The next morning, Chloe started with a visit to the lawyer. The young, yet quite promising lawyer Vladimir listened to her story with attention and sympathy. "It's a complicated case, but not hopeless. We've won harder cases," he said. "We need to gather evidence that your father built the house with his own money." "It won't be easy," Chloe sighed. "All the documents were burned in a fire a few years ago." "Then we'll have to look for other options," Vladimir said decisively. "But I believe we can prove you're right." After the meeting with the lawyer, Chloe headed to the morgue, and at the entrance, she was greeted by Stephen Hall with a smile. "You have the day off today." "How is it a day off?" "I checked the schedule, and there was nothing there," she said, surprised. "It wasn't there yesterday, but today it's a day off," the boss smiled slyly. "I consider it a gift for not dishonoring the establishment's honor." Chloe looked at the director with suspicion. "What's up with him?" "He's like some March cat. Shining and smelling." "What are you thinking about?" Stephen Hall continued. "It's true, don't doubt it. You forgot to turn off the hidden camera when you were saving that lawyer yesterday. It recorded all the resuscitation efforts, from start to finish. And I took the footage and posted it online. Oh, if only you could see the uproar it caused. Yeah, people wrote thousands of comments supporting you. They said, 'Look at how talented the nurses are at our morgue.' They'll have a new doctor soon, too. The city administration promised to sponsor us for a renovation because of this. Can you imagine? Sponsors are already lined up. New equipment, refrigeration units." Chloe's eyes shimmered with tears. Did she even think about the camera or becoming famous when she was saving Thomas yesterday? Meanwhile, the director continued. "You know, you should visit that lawyer. I heard he's come to his senses and wants to see you. So, forgive me, but I told him everything about you. That you're his former classmate and all that. Sorry, but your conversation with Cassandra got recorded too. So, I think having such connections won't hurt us. Who knows, our morgue might end up with a lawyer on our side. Well, you know better than me. Go ahead, take the chance." Chloe smiled and promised to fulfill her boss's request. Her heart skipped a beat at the thought of seeing Thomas alive and well, instead of lying in a coffin in the morgue. Soon, she was walking down the hospital corridor, feeling like a lost soul. Her nerves were stretched thin. Fear of the unknown mixed with hope and anxiety in her heart. How would Thomas react to her appearance? What would he say? Would he even remember her? Finally, she gathered her courage, approached the ICU door, and asked the nurse if she could visit Thomas Wood. The nurse looked at her with curiosity. "The patient just came to, but if it's for a short time, you can go in." Chloe entered the room, feeling her legs weaken. Thomas was lying in bed, connected to machines. His face was pale and gaunt, but his eyes, those eyes, looked at her with the same warmth and tenderness as they had many years ago. "Chloe," he whispered, giving her a weak smile. "Is it really you?" She walked closer and sat at the edge of the bed. "Thomas, I'm so glad you're alive." The young lawyer tried to raise his hand and touch her cheek. "I thought I'd never see you again. Thank you for saving me." "Don't mention it. I couldn't have done anything else." A silence fell. The former lovers looked at each other, as if trying to make up for lost time. "What happened?" Chloe asked quietly. "Did someone try to kill you?" Thomas sighed and closed his eyes. Cassandra's father, Heinrich, the head of a law firm. He always hated me, thought I was unworthy of his daughter, but I went against his choice. He took me under his wing. I was a fool to agree. But when I learned about all my father-in-law's shady dealings, I decided I'd had enough. Cassandra was just starting an affair with her lover, so I filed for divorce. Why would he want to kill you? Money, power. He controls all my assets. After my death, everything would go to Lona, and thus to him. Heinrich has connections everywhere. He got a rare breed of snake from South America. The bites of this snake mimic a heart attack. No one would have guessed. He slipped it into my bag with the fishing gear when I went to the river to swim and fish. Thomas, you need to go to the police, Chloe whispered in fear. I know, but I'm not sure who I can trust. Heinrich has his people everywhere. Then I'll help you. Thomas looked at her with gratitude. Thank you, Chloe. You seem to be the only one I can trust. Tell me everything that happened after graduation. Thomas sighed heavily, then began to tell her about his father's debts, the years spent on the run, the marriage, the constant fear, and the pressure from his influential father-in-law. Chloe listened without interrupting, her heart aching. She couldn't believe her love had endured so much suffering. I never stopped thinking about you, Chloe, he concluded. You were and are my one true love. I just didn't want to come back into your life after all these years. I was afraid I would ruin everything again, like I did that day at graduation. But I'm divorcing Cassandra. Chloe cried and hugged Thomas, pressing her whole body to his. I love you too. For a while, they remained silent, enjoying the moment of closeness. It felt as if all the bad was behind them, and an endless, cloudless future awaited them. Chloe smiled and, for the first time in a long while, felt truly happy. Even the nurse who entered couldn't break the idol in her heart. Several weeks passed. Thomas was recovering. Chloe was always by his side, supporting him, helping with everything. At the same time, she was preparing to appeal the court's decision regarding the inheritance. Albert continued to pressure her, threatening and insulting, but Chloe didn't give up. Now, she had the support of Thomas, who promised to help her in court. The day of the hearing arrived. Chloe stood in the courtroom, feeling her hands shake with nervousness. Just like many years ago, before her first surgery in the surgery department, Albert sat there, exuding confidence and self-satisfaction. Beside him sat Brittany, looking at Chloe with overt contempt. Thomas, despite his recent illness, stood to Chloe's right. His mere presence in the courtroom gave her the strength and confidence she needed. Thomas spoke first and explained that Chloe was an honest, decent person, and that her ex-husband was unlawfully trying to seize her inheritance. He provided the court with copies of checks and bank statements proving that Mark had built the house with his own money. How he managed to obtain those copies, no one knew. It seemed he had visited the companies and restored the documents. But that was Thomas's specialty as a lawyer, to know procedural loopholes. Honorable court, he said, looking directly into the judge's eyes. Albert is trying to exploit Chloe's weakness and her current position. He believes that his ex-wife cannot defend herself, but I assure you, that is not the case. My client is a strong and brave woman, and she deserves a fair decision. Albert tried to interrupt, but the judge waved him off. After lengthy deliberations, the judge retired for a private meeting. The courtroom was filled with tense silence as everyone awaited the decision. Finally, the judge returned and read out the verdict. The court has ruled, the plaintiff's claims are dismissed. The house and land remain the property of the defendant, Chloe Cooper. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Chloe cried tears of joy and, embracing Thomas, thanked him for his support. Albert was furious. He yelled and cursed at the judge, Chloe, and her lawyer. But no one was listening to the loser anymore, and even his mistress ran off at the end of the session. The court case was won, and Chloe had secured her inheritance. What more could be discussed? After that, life started to improve. Chloe regained her medical license, once again with Thomas's help and his connections. She also assisted him in investigating the case against Heinrich and Cassandra. Together, they gathered enough evidence to hand over to the police. Heinrich was arrested and brought to justice. Cassandra tried to flee abroad with her father's remaining money, but she was apprehended at the airport. Chloe and Thomas decided to start a new life. After visiting an orphanage, they decided to adopt. Artyom, a 5-year-old boy, immediately bonded with his new parents, becoming their son, joy, and hope. They had a modest wedding, without extravagance, but it was very heartfelt. "Chloe, I love you more than life itself," Thomas said, looking his bride straight in the eyes. "You are my destiny, my one true love." "I love you so much, too," Chloe replied through happy tears. The newlyweds exchanged rings and made vows of loyalty. At that moment, they felt their hearts beat in unison. After the wedding, Chloe, Thomas, and little Jake set off on a honeymoon cruise, traveling around the world for about a month, enjoying each other's company and their happy family life.